Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Erin.
Hey, Emily, let's talk about Spring Equinox.
Yes, let's. So I'm here. If you're watching this live, you're watching this streaming on Wise Woman Witchery. We're doing this as a live event. I've invited my good friend Erin LaFaive over here onto this platform, and we're actually also recording this for our podcasts. So we each have podcasts. I have The Witch Next Door, and Erin, would you like to talk about your podcast?
My podcast is an acronym HERBS, herb. If I could remember what my own podcast acronym is. Herbs with Erin, Remedies for Body and Spirit podcast.
Nice. So we are recording this live for our podcasts, respectively. And if you're catching this here, good morning. Happy Sunday. If you're catching this later, hello. Thanks for tuning in.
We're going to talk about Spring Equinox stuff.
Because spring is coming. Yes. Even though I know, Erin, where you are, it's not feeling like it, right?
Right. It's not feeling like spring equinox is coming, but there are little subtle signs that it's trying to come. And I also feel internally like I'm ready for spring. So, this is the time where I want to start thinking about how I'm going to celebrate when the spring equinox hits on that, day, and how I want to honor it and observe it as it comes and as it progresses after the equinox.
Nice. Yeah, I know here. So I'm in Northern California, and here in Northern California, it's been feeling kind of springy since like February. We had what we often have, which is a false spring where it gets super warm. It's like 75 degrees, and you're going, "What is happening?" And then all of a sudden it freezes again. So this morning there was ice on everything. But because of that false spring that we get, everything went into bloom. So all the trees went into bloom. The bulbs burst forth. Everything was like, here we are. We're ready to grow. And now I think some of those things got a little bit frostbitten.
Yeah.
Yeah. But go ahead.
I think humans are the same. Like we're like, oh, it's spring. I'm just going to go out in my shorts and, start doing all the things I think I can do. And then it freezes again. And we're like, oh my gosh, we're going back in. It's like, no, we were always there. You should have just realized it's kind of like false spring. Yes.
Yeah. You shouldn't put your sweaters back under the bed in their bin.
Right.
You need to just keep them out for a little longer. Mm-hmm. And so the official date of spring equinox this year, which is the official start of spring, is the 20th of March. And that really is a pivotal point. When the equinox hits, we actually have this day that's essentially half sunny and half light. I guess if you have clouds, it's not sunny, but half light and half night. So it's sort of this moment of balance and pause before everything goes forward.
It's an astronomical spring equinox, which just means that the sun is like directly over the equator, which is this imaginary line that humans have said like, hey, this is about halfway of the earth. And and people for hundreds and thousands of years have noticed this as well. And so that's what they call astronomical or meteorological spring equinox. But we also have meteorological spring equinox means like your temperature is starting to change. Oh. So, we have what's going on in the sun and the celestials and the heavens. And then we have what's happening down here on Earth. Like you're experiencing spring differently than I am. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. And to, now that even though it was frosty this morning, it's like all the trees that have gone into bloom are starting to bud out into their leaves. And there's definitely this motion forward, but where you are more so my geography sucks, but you're more in the middle of the country, right?
Yeah, I'm touching Canada border. I'm in that, we call it the Midwest, it's like Midwest. Are you West or are you mid? Which one are you? No, we're just like in the weirdest place. We're in the middle, upper middle is where I am actually in Wisconsin.
Okay. So where you are, and I know also to the east of you and north and all of that is still pretty chilly.
Mm-hmm.
So how
Still
do
don't
you
know.
know? And you said you feel the shift happening in your body, but are there signs at all that are happening outside that you're like, oh, spring is coming?
Well, we have some melting happening. Some of the piles of snow are smaller. So we've had some moments of melting, which is interesting because spring equinox to me is very water-based to me because there's lots of melting happening. And the second thing that happens is some of the trees do start to, their buds start to swell a little bit. So you can see these skeleton trees with no leaves, but you can start to see all these tiny little like swelled little round things, and that's their buds starting to respond to extra sunlight that they're noticing happening.
So even though they're cold, the lengthening of the days starts to call them forth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know here one of the other signs of spring. So I have an elderly chicken.
Oh, good. Geriatric chicken stories.
Geriatric chicken. But when she was younger, she and her sister would lay, through up until like probably November or whatever, and then they would sort of not lay for like 3 months and then start again. And as she's gotten older, that pattern has changed and she's not laid for longer periods of time. This year, she started laying like, I don't know, last week or so. And that is always a good sign that spring is coming. Her eggs are a little bit sad this year, but she's still making the effort. I gotta say, her body's still like, it's spring.
So that makes sense why there's such spring imagery with eggs then.
Well, I think it's chickens and the birds. So here, I don't know when this happens where you are, but here the birds are starting to nest and mate. And it's off the hook. The bird song is wild, especially the mockingbirds. They're the all-nighters. They're like, it's 3 a.m. I'm calling for my mate. Come on out. And we're like, pillow over the head. Shh, it's okay. The sun's not up yet.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, when the robins start returning here, that's a good sign. And people have this, around here, we have this kind of strange, I don't know, folklore, myth or whatever. If you see robins 3 times, that means spring is here. So yeah, if you see 3 robins, like you count, you saw one day and you saw one a couple days ago, and then that means there's enough here that you can see them that many times. But sometimes they get snowed on too. So they are signs of spring, but it doesn't mean like we'll never have any snow after that. But
right.
Yeah, we don't have mockingbirds here. So
you get to sleep through the night is what you're saying, basically.
We do.
Oh, it's funny because when I see robins, I think it's winter. And so they must come here more for winter because I tend to notice them more in the winter. And then they must go back to you. I don't know. I'm making that up. So if anyone here is a bird aficionado, you feel free to call me out because I don't know what I'm talking about. It's just that I just want to name, I associate the robins with winter because that's when I tend to really notice the influx of those particular birds.
And that's why we have our free guidebook and our bigger guidebook too about celebrating spring equinox in a way that makes sense to you. And that's
right.
Yeah, we have these the workbooks. The Spring Equinox Celebration guidebook is there, and we have a free one for you to as like a taste tester, so you can see what's in there. So there is a free mini one available. But we recognize that when me and Emily talk about the solstices and equinoxes and celebrating them, like some of it to me, like when people start talking about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not ready for that. That's not happening here. So why would I start to do that? But we put this guidebook together to help people tailor their celebrations and observations and honoring of this transition in nature to match what actually makes sense for you.
Right. In the location that you live in. And I think that's a really important thing in any celebratory thing that you do to honor the shift in the seasons is to find what resonates in the space that you're in. So, what is happening outside, and when you go outside and you start to feel into that, how does that influence what's happening inside of you? And then crafting your own celebration around that. I mean, that's really the point of these guidebooks that we created, was to help you to tap into like, what's the energy where I live? what's the energy in my body? And how do I want to rock out this celebration for the equinox so that I can really feel like it speaks to me? So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And realizing that we don't have to do a big celebration on the day of the spring equinox, that there are things that we are doing and observing as we get to the pinnacle, the party day, right? Like there's a whole lots of things we can be doing to honor and observe that transition. Because spring, there's like a ramping up of spring, then the um, the lining up of the sun with the equator, that's kind of like the big pinnacle of it. And then afterwards, there's still more signs of spring that are, the melting away and the transition to be it. It's not like there's spring, summer, winter, like specific days and then it's done. Like it all just blends into each other. So that's what our guidebooks help too, is to be able to acknowledge all those things that are happening within the ebb and flow of within that season itself.
Right. And I think, we often focus so much on that one day.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, oh, it's the equinox, we need to celebrate. But really, when your, I guess, spiritual path is really tied to the earth and tied to those seasons, you're celebrating what's happening at any given moment. And you're following, oh, okay, yeah, spring equinox, cool. Here's that moment of balance. But now that that balance tilts and moves forward, and those days are starting to get longer, then we have this whole season of spring to celebrate. And prior to that, we have that whole season of winter, feeling it start, like the ebb and flow of it all is really
Mm-hmm.
what I think, I know I'm celebrating kind of all the time, is tuning into what's happening as things ramp up and back down, as new seasons enter and then fade away. So it's very cool.
Yeah, it's like there's early spring, there's mid spring, there's late spring. We always think about spring as just like one thing, but yes, the ebb and the flow of it within itself.
It's a whole quarter of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you that might be watching live, you can absolutely hop up into the description and click on the link that's up there, and that will take you over to sign up and get your own free guidebook, so that you can see a little bit about what we're talking about, some of the prompts, divination. There's goodies in there for you. And if you're catching this on our podcasts, I know for my podcast, I will put a link for that in my description, but you can also find it on my website, wisewomanwitchery.com.
Yes, and the bigger one, if you decide to purchase that, it's only $19, and it's like 45 pages packed with. We have recipes, activity suggestions, a whole section where we help guide you through connecting with the season and celebrating in a way that you want to, whether it's in your home or with others. So it's like this exploration set of questions and reflections for you to do. And you can use that every single season. When it comes around, you get to download that document. You can print it. You can type in it. It's electronically fillable. So it's yours to keep. And it's really full of all sorts of useful information for the spring equinox.
Nice. Erin, do you have a favorite way to celebrate the spring equinox?
Well, I would say decorating eggs seems to be like really core, something that I'm keeping from my childhood. It's just so much fun. I don't have any I don't keep chickens like you do, and I know other people that do around here, and they will say, oh yeah, now my chickens are producing more. So like in the beginning, when I was a kid, I didn't know there was that correlation between like, why are these eggs, what's the deal with these eggs? But now I just love the symbolism, the colors, I don't know, the whole process. And I have children now too, so to get them involved. And I like to play with different herbs and plants to see what kind of dyes I can get out to work with the eggs as well.
So I have to say that is one thing that I have never done, is used plants to dye eggs. It's like my fantasy where I'm like, I'm going to dye eggs. Okay, here's my confession. I hate hard-boiled eggs.
Ah!
I think they're super gross. So
Yes.
So, what I did last year, actually, because I love decorating eggs too, and what I did last year was I blew out an egg and then I drew on it with
Yes.
markers. And then actually, I just broke it the other day. Other confession. Bad
Well,
witch.
Well, I mean, it's an egg that doesn't have anything inside. It's time for a new one. That's all it's telling you. It's time for a new one.
Right. It's time for a new one.
Yeah.
But I bet you could probably dye blown out eggs as well with plant dyes.
Yes, I have not done it, but it would make sense that you could do that. There are some that can be boiled with the plant material, and some that just soak with the
Oh.
plant material. So maybe I'll do some experimenting with eggs that I blow out this time. So we'll put that in the next spring guidebook, how to do that.
Yes, yes. Well, this one actually has the bigger guidebook has some information on how to dye eggs with
Oh yeah,
plant.
there's like 3 pages of that, but I need to try it with blown out eggs to see, how would I do that because I usually boil the plant material and the water and the egg together. But
Uh,
with a blown out egg, I just don't know how that would. I just don't know. It's a fun experiment.
I love experiments. It's like a
Mhm.
science project that's totally tied to the season.
Yeah.
Fertility. I mean, that's what eggs represent, right? It's all about fertility and new
Rebirth.
everything, new
Yeah.
birth, new growth. Yeah, bursting forth.
Food. Oh my goodness. Back in the day when you didn't have a supermarket, meant protein and sustenance.
Yes,
Yeah.
it definitely meant that. And it meant that, with the baby animals coming, there's going to be more milk. The ground is thawing so we can grow some stuff because our winter stores are getting pretty sparse at this point. We're so blessed to be able to just hop on down to the market. But, you know, or when you live in a more temperate climate, you can still grow through the winter.
Yes, there's no growing here unless you do it inside. So what are some other things you like to do for spring celebration?
One of the things I really like to do is to make wreaths and to make bouquets of spring flowers. What's always disappointing to me is that all the spring wildflowers, they don't really like to be picked and put in water. They're like, oh, our little heads are falling over very quickly. Um, but there's some that do tolerate it more, and I do love to have those splashes of color. And then I love the idea of making a wreath and having that splash of color as well. So
Yes, they're very short-lived, and I'm trying to think of ones that dry well, and I just can't even think of a um, early spring flower that would even dry well. But
well,
they're
calendula is coming up here,
oh
and that dries pretty well.
yes, that does.
So that's a good one. And then we actually on the edible side we have borage. Oh well, calendula is edible too, but borage is coming up as well, starting to get those little buds. So pretty by the equinox, we will definitely have some of those lovely purple flowers.
Wow. I mean, I'm waiting for those in June and July. We are late here.
Right? That's so interesting. So then those become your summertime markers, whereas
Yes.
here they're the springtime markers. Yeah, so interesting. So I love celebrating like that. I also love to make some yummy food. So springtime things like asparagus.
Mm,
Got myself some asparagus this morning at the market. So I love those springtime foods as well. All the plants that are coming available at this point in time.
yes, eggs, asparagus. For us in the spring, it's nettles.
Oh yeah, nettles.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Have you ever made that nettle cake? I've seen recipes for this nettle cake online.
I haven't made the nettle cake, but I have used nettle leaf powder in some other sweet like cookies and stuff. I've been really experimenting with it. And about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons can be hid in like, I put them in no bake cookies.
Oh, uh-huh.
It's just like chocolate and I don't know, butter and oatmeal. But the color, that really dark green color, some people don't really like to see that. So if you can hide it under another color, and which is the chocolate, the dark brown. And then the flavor of the nettle didn't really come out either. So there's that really deep green if you're going to love that color and some of the flavor of it. If you're going to love that too. But yeah, that beautiful nettle dark green cake I've seen online, that to me is really beautiful. And hopefully I can make that someday.
Yeah, one of the women in our circle, in my women's circle, made little mini nettle cakes for all of us last year, and like crumbled up cake and dyed it green and put it on the top. So it looked like moss was growing all over these. They were so beautiful. And I don't know if I'm a human that has enough patience. I love to cook, but I don't know if I have enough patience to cook on that level, but I wish I did. Because that was not only delicious, but it was super beautiful.
Yeah. Or we just find the friends who can do the patience part of it.
Well, I was just thinking, cookies do ship well. Just hint, hint.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, they do. Yeah. And it's how did it taste? Did you notice any?
I didn't notice the nettle. No, I didn't notice it, but it was delicious. It was delicious.
And it's so good for you. It's so good for spring allergies, and it's an antihistamine, so it's really good.
It's excellent. So because we're doing this live, I noticed that we have a few comments that are coming in, and I think it's worth noting them because I know Dana says this is great nettles. She puts them in lasagna.
Oh yeah.
Which I think that's a fabulous tip, right? So bring in the nettles for the spring lasagna. Yum. And Lisa mentions that she's been tracking the resident nesting duck pair that arrives when the daffodils bloom. So just signs, right? Like going back to what we were talking about earlier, signs in your area that spring is coming.
I love it. She says daffies equal ducks.
Yes.
Daffodils equal ducks. That's really great. That's called phenology, when people can see things in nature that really happen quite frequently every single year. And those things indicate other things that are happening, like for here, it's like when the oak tree leaves have become the size of a mouse's ear, that's the time to plant your peas. So yeah, so that's really great that she noticed how the daffodils are in bloom. And then, hey, if you were that kind of forager at the time, you'd be like, good, we're gonna go look for the duck eggs now they're here. Yeah, it's great.
No, you don't look for the duck eggs.
No.
Please don't look for the duck eggs, everybody. Just let them become babies.
Well, back in the day when people were no markets, when we didn't have, I'm talking like, 1700.
I know. I'm joking. See, here's the other thing. Baby ducks are one of my most favorite things in all the land. I don't know they almost make me cry because of the way they touch my heart, because they're so freaking cute. I just want to put them on my face.
Well, that's a big spring imagery too. When is like little ducks and chicks and yeah, I mean, just after going through a whole winter of just sameness here, there's no sun, it seems like sometimes, and they have these fluffy, beautiful little ducks, and they're different colors. Oh yeah,
the precious babies. The other baby thing we had at our house was on March 31st, 4 years ago, I had adopted a pregnant cat that gave birth. And so it was right after, spring had just started. And so we have that as one of our markers, our personal markers in our home, is it's like our spring kittens.
Yeah. All the little things being born. Yes.
Yeah. So Spring Equinox. So the other thing, just to throw out there to folks, if you're hearing this before March 20th and you're looking for ways to celebrate maybe in community, Erin and I have joined forces to co-create a Spring Equinox ceremony that we're offering to the public. If you're watching this right now live with us, I did not put that link up in the description, but you can find out more details. If you sign up for that guidebook, you'll get an email with all the details in it. And if you're already in our communities, you'll already know how to come hang out with us. But one of the things I love about all the seasons is getting to celebrate in community, because there's something really special about creating your own celebration and then also getting to be with other people and feeling that collective energy of co-creating and celebrating together. And we can do that and still have that energy on the internet, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Emily and I have been doing this for a while, doing internet ceremonies. So we have some fun things that we can do to, create that space virtually. So it's a lot of fun to be able to do it in the comfort of your home. And like I said, here where it's winter, today is pretty icy out. So by the time our ceremony comes around on March 20th, then, if there's inclement weather and we can't travel, it doesn't matter because we're going to just be right here on the virtual space for the ceremony.
Yep. And we'll be warm and we'll be feeling the energy of the time, even if it's still chilly outside.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. Trying to wake up the space, wake ourselves up and get ready as spring is coming through.
Right. So one more thing I want to mention, is that one of the things I also love about this time of year is sort of that shift from quiet to quickening, how we go from, everything's kind of still and it's cold and nothing's really growing. And then everything starts to wake up. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, it actually can give me anxiety, to be honest, because the shift here can be so profound that all of a sudden everything is growing and I'm like, no, wait, I'm not ready. Make it stop.
That's why shifting, slowly into, it's good.
Right. So what I like to do, one of the things I like to do is intentional movement. Mm-hmm. So like putting on some crazy wild drumming and just like flailing around and feeling it or hopping up and down. And I know it sounds silly and it probably can feel silly too, but it also feels really good to let your body really wake up, to find like intentionally. Like most of us probably have some type of exercise we do throughout the year, whether it be walking or harder cardio or whatever, but even in the winter months. But there's something about intentionally being like, I'm waking it all up, here it goes, that feels pretty amazing. So anyway, just food for thought. If you're having a challenging time with that transition, you can ask your body to make it by putting on some music and just having yourself a little dance party wildly, like a feral beast.
That's a great suggestion. And Emily has a lot of good suggestions in the guidebook too about making that transition from one season to the next. So get your guidebook.
Get your guidebook. Learn how to do the thing. Or you probably already know how to do the thing, but learn some new ways to think about it.
There you go.
Yeah. Is there more, Erin, or are we wrapping here?
I think we're wrapping up, lady.
I think so too. So thank you to everybody who joined in live. For those of you catching this on our podcast, thanks for listening in. And I hope that we will see some of your beautiful faces smiling back at us during our spring equinox ceremony.
Absolutely. Come join us.
Join us. It will be fun. Bye.
See ya, everybody.